Over the last holiday season, I kept seeing sales for watches from a company that I didn't know much about, a company called AV-8. Usually they came in a nice little gift box with some extra straps. Seemed like they might make a nice gift. I wasn't doing this channel yet, so I never bothered to pick one up. But about a month ago I saw another deal for one, and I decided to get it to review. So today we're going to take a look at another pilot style watch, an AV-8 Flyboy Tuck. AV-8, which is spelled with 3 letters and a number, is a company that has been around for about 10 years. Their entire lineup is based on pilot-themed watches, with a slant towards the UK's Royal Air Force. I wanted to know more about the company itself, but their website doesn't say a whole lot. The About page on their website actually doesn't say anything about the company itself. It just talks about the history of various aircraft that the watches are named after, which for me is always a negative, as you never know if it's truly a legit company or just a bunch of fake marketing. But the website and some of the watches actually seem similar to another brand I'd been seeing a lot of, called Spinnaker, which Spinnaker is a sailing-themed watches instead of aviation. I thought there might be a connection to the two, and I was correct. After a little bit of digging, I found out they are both owned by a company out of the UK called Dartmouth Brands, which also owns some other brands of watches with specific theming. Now, before we get too far, I want to say one thing about their pricing. There is a huge variation in pricing for the watches from Dartmouth Brands. So, for example, on this particular model of the Flyboy Tuck, retail on their website is $395, yet I found some websites selling them for $425, and yet there's also a different version on Amazon for $275, although I only paid $99 for this on Massdrop, which if you're not familiar with Massdrop, I'll throw a link down below in the description. But needless to say, prices can and do vary greatly, so I have absolutely no idea what would be considered normal for a watch from AV-8. I'm going to do something a little different and show the packaging. I usually don't like to do an unboxing type video, but the Flyboy does come with a nice little box. Now onto the watch itself. It's a black coated stainless steel case. Nothing spectacular about it, but it does have a nice finish. I think the best thing about the Flyboy Tuck is its dial. This particular dial is a granite gray with white accent, and you can see that it has a matte rough texture to it. You can also see that the Arabic numerals and the hour indicators along the chapter ring are raised. I don't know if they're actually applied or if it's just part of the molding of the dial. The minute indicators on the chapter ring, as well as the logo, are painted on. There are 2 subdials. One at the 4 o'clock position is a sub-second hand, and the one at the 8 o'clock position is a 24-hour, and you can see that it has a nice circular pattern emanating from the center. The hands for the hour, minute, and 24-hour are cut out sword shapes, with lume applied to the edges, while the second hand is a tiny little red airplane, which to me is very reminiscent of the second time zone hand on a Citizen Nighthawk. And just to point it out, there is no date complication. Not necessarily a bad thing, but since so many watches do, I usually take it as a given. So I like to point it out when a watch doesn't actually have the date. Now, this is definitely not a Flieger style watch, as it's missing the arrow at the 12 o'clock position. In fact, it's even missing the 12 at the 12 o'clock position. In its place is a 0, which is a little different, which, if you check out the Loom, you can see that it's more than the second hand that makes this a pilot's watch. As with the 0 at the 12 o'clock position, it is very reminiscent of a plane's altimeter. It's a little different, but I like it. The Loom is decent. It has a blue hue to it rather than the normal green. It could be brighter, especially considering the numerals as well as the hands have lume applied to it, but it's okay. Now, the Flyboy Tuck has an ever so slightly raised dome crystal, and it's a sapphire crystal to be exact, which for the price I paid is great, but it's something that you would expect as you get closer to the MSRP of the watch. Now the crown is at the 2 o'clock position, which is a little different. And it's sort of an onion-shaped crown, or maybe a half onion. So possibly a little Flieger inspiration there. While the crown isn't signed, it does have a bullseye type design on the top of it. Although it might not be a Flieger onion style crown, but it could be more of a knob on the dash of a plane's cockpit. I'm not sure, but what I am sure of is that it's a little small and inconveniently placed. While I appreciate the attempt at doing something different, I'm not sure it was fully thought out. The crown itself isn't necessarily small per se, but the combination of the shape, the size, and being that close to the lug make it a little more difficult to manipulate than as if it were at the 3 o'clock position, as the lug tends to get in the way of my fingers as I try to grab the crown. Speaking of the crown, the watch is windable, but it is not hackable. Now the strap that the watch comes with is a gray leather NATO style strap. The leather is a little on the thin side, but not too much, but it has a very nice texture to it. The accompanying hardware is a black stainless steel, with a nicely made signed buckle. On the back of the watch you have an exhibition case back, with what I assume is another sapphire crystal. You can also see a custom rotor with a touch of RAF flare. It utilizes a Miyota 8247 movement, which is 21 joules and a 42-hour power reserve, and runs at 21,600 beats per hour. As for accuracy of this specific watch, I was getting about plus 10 seconds a day. It also has a water resistance of 50 meters. So you could take it swimming, but I probably wouldn't. Here are the dimensions of the watch. The Flyboy is about 42 millimeters wide without the crown, 46 millimeters with the crown. Lug to lug is about 48 millimeters, and it has a thickness of 13. The strap width is 22 millimeters, and it weighs about 79 grams. Generally, I like NATO straps, and I also usually don't have a problem wearing a 42 millimeter watch. The diameter of my wrist is about 7 inches, and I usually prefer 40, but 42 is usually no problem. But for some reason, I just really didn't like wearing the Flyboy with the leather NATO that it comes with. So with this leather NATO on it, it makes the watch feel bigger and almost too tall for me. And for some reason it just feels like it's too constricting against my wrist. And while I like the feel of it, I hate wearing it. But I put on another leather strap that I had to give it a second chance, and it made a world of difference. It was comfortable, and it wore nice. And personally, I think it looks a lot better on that brown leather strap than the one it comes with. AV-8 has a lot of interesting looking designs, and the Flyboy Tuck is no different. I really like the textured dial, as well as the cutout hands, which really played well with the Loom, although I do wish that the Loom was just a little bit brighter. But for some reason, the overall design never quite grew on me. Unlike the Flieger style of the Citizen Avion, where the more I wore it, the more I appreciated it. Although, I will say that I liked it a whole lot more once I changed that strap. That said, I think it's a good watch. The fit and finish of the case are good, it has a unique design and a sapphire crystal. My only real complaint is that I would much prefer a date than a 24-hour subdial, which there are versions of the Flyboy that actually have that combination, as well as a normal leather strap. But for the Flyboy Tuck specifically, it's hard to recommend it, as I don't really know what one would normally expect to pay for it. Now, I paid $99 on Massdrop, and at that price I would recommend it. After all, you're getting a uniquely designed watch, a Japanese automatic movement, and a sapphire crystal for under $100. What's not to like? But as you start getting closer to the MSRP of the watch, it's a whole different story. So, in the end, I think this is a good watch that there's nothing really wrong with. But at the same time, I never really found anything right about it either. While there are key aspects of it that I like, I think as a whole, the watch is just okay. But for me, I think the bigger takeaway is about the company itself. While AV-8 may seem a little mysterious, they seem to make a decent watch. So while I don't think I'll be keeping this one around too long, I'll be keeping an eye out for other watches from the company. If you have any experience with the Dartmouth brands, let me know in the comments. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe.